Hello and welcome to Nice and Blunt. It's Tuesday, and that means it's waiver day. We got to get those claims in before this evening. So let's talk about all the must-add players at all of the key positions. Let's kick it off with quarterback because I think there's a must-add quarterback as either a backup or a very good bye-week streaming fill-in. I'm talking about Sam Darnold, who's only rostered in 18% on ESPN, and we saw the ceiling last week against Dallas. Right now, he's 9th among all quarterbacks in fantasy points per game, and I think the stats back that up. 12th in the NFL in pass attempts, the volume's pretty high, and 6th in passing yards, so he's doing a great job with it. DJ Moore is really coming through for him, and he's tied for 5th so far in total touchdowns per game. He scored 5 rushing touchdowns so far, so he's getting it done with his legs as well, and that's a big boost in fantasy points. So I don't know if you can count on that every single week. Christian McCaffrey will come back and steal some of those from him, but it is a part of his game, and it's definitely a big boost. So Sam Darnold, I think, is a legit top 15 quarterback, a must-add at the quarterback position, especially as we approach the bye weeks, or if you just need a streamer every single week. And then Kirk Cousins is also very interesting, rostering 52% on ESPN. Not much of a rushing game, however, 9th most in terms of pass attempts, 10th in yards among all quarterbacks so far, and a very good touchdown to interception ratio. 9 touchdowns to only 1 interception so far, so very good, and tied for 9th in terms of touchdowns per game. So very good stats for Kirk Cousins so far. I think I'm ready to buy in as a top 15 quarterback, so definitely worth an add as your backup. Let's move on to running back, though, because there is a must-add player at the running back position. Damien Williams of the Chicago Bears, currently rostered only 10% on ESPN. David Montgomery injured his knee, and he's going to be out for at least a month, 4 to 6 weeks with a knee injury. And him leaving opens up 18.8 touches per game, basically 19 touches a game will be available for Damien Williams and the running backs replacing him. Damien Williams was already getting 6 touches per game, so I think his workload is going to be really high as he fills in for David Montgomery. So Damien Williams, we know, is a good pass catcher, and that could be a very significant part of his game and his workload. I think he is a must-add top 20 running back as long as David Montgomery remains out. But a player who I think holds more long-term value and pretty similar value for the next month is Latavius Murray of the Baltimore Ravens, only rostered in 34% on ESPN. In week 4, he saw 18 carries, which led the team. So a great sign that they're committing to him. And also his 3rd rushing touchdown was scored in that game on the season. So very high scoring potential. He's definitely involved in the red zone. And if you were worried about the committee, worried about Tyson Williams and these other running backs, Tyson Williams was inactive against Denver. So this is just a great sign that they are committed to Latavius Murray as their number 1 running back. And I think going forward, I'm going to consistently rank him inside the top 20. So I think him and Damien Williams are just as valuable, but long-term, Latavius Murray will retain his job. So I would almost prefer him to Damien Williams, but I think in the next month, Damien Williams offers a little bit more upside. So keep that in mind. Definitely an interesting player. Alex Collins is an interesting handcuff to have for Chris Carson. He saw 10 carries for 44 yards and a touchdown, and also caught 2 passes for 35 yards. So pretty good efficiency for Alex Collins. And the workload for Chris Carson is kind of interesting. In the first game, he saw more than 16 touches. However, in the last 3 games, exactly 13 carries every single week, and only 1 target in 2 of those games. That other game, 0 targets. So I'm a little concerned that the workload is capped and limited to 15 touches max for Chris Carson. So if Alex Collins is the backup, he is going to be involved, and I think 10 to 12 touches a game is what you can expect, and that will have value going forward. However, definitely just a handcuff option, not anything more than a backup running back. Same goes for Samaje Perine, who offers a little bit of interesting potential this week. He filled in for Joe Mixon on the final drive of that game against Jacksonville, who looked to go down with an injury, but looked to be okay, and according to Joe Mixon himself, he will be fine and be ready to go. So it's worth monitoring the situation, but if you have Joe Mixon and you are concerned about your running back depth, I would consider picking up Samaje Perine strictly as a handcuff option. I'm not really interested in him otherwise because I'm not convinced that he starts the game next week. However, if anything were to happen to Joe Mixon, there's a massive workload available in Cincinnati. Joe Mixon is currently getting 22.5 touches per game, which ranks third, just barely behind Christian McCaffrey's 22.7 per game. So a massive workload for Joe Mixon. And if it goes to Samaje Perine, then he will also have value, a clear top 20 running back if he is the starter for the Bengals. However, otherwise, there aren't really any names that are really worth your attention, but there is a player who should be rostered in more leagues, especially PPR formats, and that's J.D. McKissic of the Washington football team. Against Atlanta, he saw another 5 targets and caught all 5 of them. So with such good hands, he's definitely going to be more and more involved in the passing game, and he really proved it in that game. He was second on the team in targets, so he's going to be very involved with passing volume. I think that could go up. However, 5 targets is a lot for a running back, so I'm not sure that it goes that much higher. However, it just means that Antonio Gibson, his upside is capped, and it's very unfortunate if you have Antonio Gibson, because what I was counting on to view him as a top 12 running back was an increased role in the passing game. And if that still goes to J.D. McKissic, then his upside just isn't there, and I'm going to rank him closer to like running back 16 or 18. I just don't know if the ceiling is there for Antonio Gibson if J.D. McKissic is so involved in the passing game. Let's move on to wide receiver, though, because these are some important players with a lot of upside. Emmanuel Sanders, I think, is the most important player to add under 50% rostership. 4 straight games with 6+ targets, so that's a pretty consistent workload and a very high ceiling because a whopping 16.8 yards per reception average through those 4 games, and that ranks as wide receiver 13 at the moment among all wide receivers in the NFL. So very high ceiling, high scoring upside in this Buffalo passing game. Emmanuel Sanders is a must-add player in my opinion. Another player who I feel like I can justify with the same logic, AJ Green rostered in 27%, 4 straight games with exactly 6 targets. So very high consistency like Emmanuel Sanders, and also a very high yards per reception of 16.5 yards per reception. So pretty much the same as Emmanuel Sanders, ranks 16th best among all wide receivers. And just like Buffalo, the Arizona Cardinals have a very potent, high-scoring passing offense. So there's a lot of scoring potential as well. And he scored a touchdown in back-to-back games. So him and Emmanuel Sanders are very, very interesting acquisitions at the wide receiver position. I justified adding Rondale Moore and Christian Kirk. I feel like I have to include AJ Green as well under the same logic. They are all very valuable players. And then Hunter Renfrow, 42% rostered at the moment, 30 targets through 4 weeks. That ranks as wide receiver 27, very high workload, and 5.5 receptions per game, ranks as wide receiver 24. So top 30 in both categories and 2 touchdowns already. So he's a top 35 wide receiver, and he's going to be very consistent. We know that he is a very smart player making that tackle on that fake punt. We know he's going to be rewarded with at least 5 receptions per game. I love Hunter Renfrow. And then a couple players that are definitely worth your attention. Jamison Crowder caught 7 of 9 targets in his return to the Jets. However, Elijah Moore did miss this game with a concussion, so he will be back, and that will limit the upside of Jamison Crowder. I still think Corey Davis is the number 1 wide receiver for the Jets. So I'm adding Crowder to the watch list, but I'm not ready to add him just yet. I want to see it at least one more time before I commit to him. But 9 targets is 9 targets. So he's PPR gold, a very high floor, but very limited ceiling, only 8.7 yards per reception. And that ranks 11th worst among all wide receivers this year. So not the best efficiency for Jamison Crowder, but those receptions are PPR gold. So worth an add to the watch list at least. And another player worth monitoring, Randall Cobb, who, as long as MVS remains out, I think is worth an add, but I'm not sure if he holds long-term value. He caught 5 of 6 targets for 69 yards and 2 touchdowns in last week's game, and I don't think that's something you can rely on. 2 touchdowns in a game is pretty rare. It's more likely that that goes to Devontae Adams or Aaron Jones than it goes back to him. But we know that the Green Bay wide receiver 2 always has value, so as long as MVS is on IR, then Randall Cobb has value. So worth an add if you are desperate, but I'm not sure he's the best player long term. Let's move on to tight end because there's 4 names who I think are must adds, and this first name is rostered in 69% of leagues, so odds are he's not available, but if he is a top 10 tight end and a must add at the position. I'm talking about Mike Gesicki of the Dolphins. I hyped him up a lot coming into the year, and after that dud in week 1, he's come back with a vengeance. 24 targets the last 3 games and 8 targets per game. That average would rank as wide receiver 21. So you definitely want wide receiver 21, and if that's a tight end, even better. So definitely just check for Mike Gesicki. He's available in 31% on ESPN, and he's a must-add tight end, a clear top 10 option every single week. Another player who I believe is a top 10 tight end, and he's only rostered from 53%, so odds are he is available. Jared Cook of the LA Chargers. We saw his potential last night, scoring that touchdown, catching 70 yards in that game against the Las Vegas Raiders. But it's 4 straight games with an end zone target. Now, the first one was tipped, ruled a fumble, so it didn't work out. But in weeks 2 and 3, he caught it, and he would have scored if not for a penalty by another player calling the play back. So 4 straight games with an end zone target, even though only one of them counted. And in this offense, his connection with Justin Herbert, he's going to have a lot of scoring potential every single week. His role in the red zone is legit, and I think Jared Cook is a clear top 10 tight end every single week. Pick him up if you can. However, if you can't pick up either player, there's 2 tight ends who I think are definitely inside the top 15 and have top 10 potential every single week. I'm talking about Dalton Schultz of the Dallas Cowboys, rostered 22%. In 3 of 4 games, he's caught at least 6 receptions. The only game that didn't happen was that game against the Chargers, and the Cowboys' time possession was terribly low. So that was more of a fluke, and I think the workload for Dalton Schultz is there. You can rely on it, and he's definitely a top 12 tight end. I'm going to view him as such every single week. And with 3 touchdowns in the last 2 games, the scoring potential is there, and every tight end is touchdown dependent. You want one that can score, and that is definitely Dalton Schultz. Same goes for Dawson Knox, who has 4 touchdowns on the year so far, and he's scored in 3 straight games. So you can rely on his role in the red zone, and it makes sense. He's a big target, one of the biggest on the team. He's very consistent, and through 4 games, 20 targets is a very high workload for any tight end. So not only is he scoring touchdowns, but he's getting the work. I'm going to rank him inside the top 15 going forward for sure. But let's move on to defense, because this is where you can get an advantage every single week, and the top streaming defense is clearly the New England Patriots going up against Houston in week 5. So they're going to have a great game. They held the Buccaneers to less than 20 points, so their defense is legit. We know that Belichick is a great coach. And they're going to be a team that you can hold on to through the rest of the year. Stephon Gilmore will come back from the PUP list very soon, and this defense is one of the best in the league. So I really believe in the New England Patriots defense. Rostered in 60%, so they might not be available, but if they are, you got to pick them up at least for this week. They are going to be a top 3 defense against Houston. If they are unavailable, another good streaming option is the Vikings defense going up against Detroit at home. And they held Cleveland to only 14 points last week. However, I'm not convinced that they're going to hold value the rest of the year. But against Detroit, they're definitely a good streaming option in week 5. However, odds are you're going to drop them next week. I wouldn't really want to hold on to them long term. The Cowboys are also very interesting, going up against the New York Giants at home, rostered 22.5%. They're also going to be streamable in week 6, going up against New England on the road. So their defense has looked really good, 10 turnovers through 4 games, and every single game they've caught at least 2 interceptions. Trayvon Diggs is looking amazing. They also have 2 fumble recoveries and 9 sacks. So this defense is looking good. I definitely underrated them coming into the year, but they have been giving up quite a bit of points, so that does lose you fantasy points. However, the turnover potential is really, really looking good. So an interesting streamer for the next 2 weeks are the Cowboys. The Titans at the Jacksonville Jaguars, It's kind of interesting, not the worst play you could make, but I think there are some better options. However, if you get tempted to stream either the Jets defense or the Falcons defense, I think you're making a huge mistake. This is going to be a shootout of a game, not very much defense at all, and I would rather steer clear both bad defenses, even though they both have good matchups. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for this week's waiver wire segment. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more content. My name is Adam Riancho, and thank you for watching Nice and Blunt.